Welcome to Inside Outside, a podcast that explores educational interests from both inside and outside of education. I'm Jeff Bailey, the Educational Insider.
And I'm John Gonzalez, the Educational Outsider. Jeff and I are excited to explore various topics related to education from multiple perspectives.
No matter who you are, if you're interested in the world of education, this podcast is for you.
We'll be speaking with a variety of guests to gain a better understanding of what's working and what's not in education.
Our goal is simply to spark meaningful conversation and encourage new ways of thinking about education, ultimately inspiring positive change and progress. We welcome you to Inside Outside and can't wait to explore the fascinating world of education together.
On this episode, we are taking a look at some of the concerns educators have about the impact of AI on students.
Today, we have a special guest joining us on the show to talk about questions he has about the ultimate impact AI will have not just on teachers, but the students who are in our classrooms.
We do want to welcome our guest. He is Jay Henry. He is the Educational Technology Coordinator at Ballard Creek Public Schools in Ballard Creek, Michigan. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Good to talk to both of you.
Good to talk to you as well. As I understand, you worked with Mr. Jeff Bailey for a few years?
Quite a few years, yeah. I guess probably right about 20 years, actually.
25.
25, my goodness.
Yeah, we're slowly going to go through everybody I worked with over those 26 years I was in Coldwater. No, actually,
well, at least everybody that still talks to you.
People still talk to me.
Yeah,
so you were in Coldwater country for a lot of years there. But now you're in Ballard Creek, which is not too far down the road. How you liking Ballard Creek?
Oh, I'm real happy here, real happy with the work that I'm doing. It's a great opportunity to interact with educators in sort of a different way than I have done traditionally for my first 30 years of employment. And so I'm enjoying that and enjoying trying to help teachers to be able to be more effective and efficient in their classrooms, utilizing technology tools when they make sense.
Okay, give me one good Jeff Bailey story before we get on the topic of the day.
He doesn't have any, I bet.
You know what? I mean, Jeff was a neighbor as well as a friend at Coldwater Community Schools. And I'll tell you one thing, that he was the first person I saw with a Chromebook in his hands. He had applied to Google to be an early tester of a Chromebook. And so I got a chance. It was at parent-teacher conferences one time, and he had it sitting there in front of him. And it's the first example of one that I had seen. I don't think it was a really spectacular device in that first iteration, but nonetheless, it was something that we both looked at the time and knew that we were seeing the future. And sure enough, we have. Now, COVID accelerated that future and bringing those devices into schools, but that was really one of my first instances of starting to think long-term about technology and education in a more integrated fashion.
Well, I think you already know that I'm the outsider when it comes to education, and Jeff is the insider, and you would be double the insider as well. Mr. Bailey, why don't you give me one good story about Jay before we get going?
Well, actually, it was interesting because Jay and I did live in the same neighborhood, and so we were the teachers who walked to school. So I think actually we might have been the only teachers in Coldwater who didn't have a second car. We both had wives that were stay-at-home moms. Yeah. And so we had one car. And so Jay and I most of the time we would walk or ride bikes. And so, Jay's a pretty straight shot that way. I was telling John Jay that you're the, we had Ryan Sheets on here a couple weeks ago, and you're the calm, reflective, educator that we all think we want to be, as opposed to Ryan, who's more of the wild child.
And I think that what's great about that, though, is Ryan brings a lot of energy with him, a lot of excitement with him. And so that energy sometimes pushes things forward in a school building in a really positive way. You do need people around who are a little bit more reflective and maybe want to take a little bit of a pause or see how something might work in a more controlled space first. But you certainly need that energy and excitement about trying new things as well. And so it's a good thing to have in any building, any district, to have both of those kinds of personalities reflected.
So Jay, you sort of made your transition from the classroom to Ballard Creek Public during this sort of time of AI sort of taking over the educational field. Did you have any interactions with it in the classroom or in the school?
I actually did not have any interactions when I was teaching in my classroom. I had some things that I did on my own just to kind of tinker with it a little bit and see what was going on. But it sort of took a step forward right as I was making that transition, right as I was getting ready to move on from my classroom. It sort of made an iterative leap. And so that was something I didn't really do. And I've just really begun. I've been working on it up here, actually, in Ballard Creek. Some ways I think that AI will help teachers in the classroom and producing some resources for them, but never really actually had to use them in the classroom myself.
Jay, how much do teachers talk about technology and not just AI, but just technology changes? Because it just seems like it was kind of stagnant for a while there. And then, Google came along and all these products started coming along. And then everyone had an Apple device, and then iPhones became prevalent. Was it slow for teachers to get behind the fact that technology would not only like change in a matter of a few years, but in a matter of just a year, a lot can happen today?
Yeah, I think early on it was a bit slow. When I came to Coldwater, 30 years ago, I actually went to a small software shop in Battle Creek and purchased a gradebook software that I loaded on my own computer at home. And at the time, a lot of teachers thought, that's just dumb. Why are you doing that? They all had their paper grade books. They carried them around. And what they would say to me is that, well, now you have to put your grades in twice. You have to record them at some point and then take it home, go to your computer and put them in the computer. And my response was, you put them in twice too. You write them down in your paper grade book and then you enter them in your calculator at the end of the semester. I said, I am putting them into the computer, that second entry, when I want to all throughout the semester, and you're doing it all under pressure. I'll take my way. Thank you very much. And so I was pretty content with doing that. But the first reaction was a lot of people didn't see much need for computers. But then there did begin to be changes. And I think first it was with Apple. It looked like Apple was going to run the education market. The problem with Apple was their devices were very, very expensive. They were pricing schools out in many cases of using their devices. But it was that Chromebook that Jeff had in his hands at the parent-teacher conferences. That was the real game changer. And since then, I think the pace of conversation with teachers has increased pretty dramatically. And they are tending to be much more interested in at least hearing about what's going on from someone else who might be using it, even if they're not really quick to want to use it themselves. But a lot more teachers are very quick. They want to jump in and they want to see how they can make some tool work for them and improve their workflow with their students.
Yeah, that's, Jay, that was interesting that you told that story about early on in your career, because one of the funny things about when I was in Coldwater was we were taking attendance on the computer. And then at the end of every week, we would have to print out our attendance and staple them together and then turn them in. And I'd be like 30 weeks behind and I'd be getting yelled at. But it was just so pointless to me. And actually, that's my big fear with AI, Jay, is that this technology is there. And it's so powerful. I mean, it's going to be the biggest change to education that we'll ever see in our lifetime. And I just worry that somehow people want to go backwards. And I know you worry, one of the worries I think you have about in that in particular is that you don't want to go forward too fast. And so I think that, really as part of our conversation today, I think the process is, how do we process all this information? Did you see the story on 60 Minutes last week about AI with Google?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
So, I took his quote about that they were releasing it slowly. And, part of it was so that people like the reporter. And I actually thought, well, people like me and people like John and people like you, that we could process this and figure out how we don't ruin everything. So, to me, that's my big worry with education is we do tend to be people who are using a computer, but we're also printing our attendance sheets, or that we put grades in one way, but they want it in a paper version in another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do have some concerns about that in terms of our ability to adapt. One of the things about AI is its change is exponential, and the human mind doesn't do exponential very well. We are linear thinkers, and we can progress in a linear fashion. But when we start making that curve really go on the steep incline and go exponential, we don't handle that really, really well. And I think we tend to respond in a couple of different ways, one of which is that we can panic. And I think we're hearing a little bit of that going on right now in response to ChatGPT and other AI features, is that people are panicking a little bit. This is going to destroy education. It's going to eliminate teacher jobs. All the students are going to cheat. All of those concerns are really high on the agenda of people. And then there's another side in which is we tend to just let some of these exponential things roll right over us. And I think both of those are, we don't need to panic. I don't think that that's what's called for in this circumstance. At the same time, I think a thoughtful implementation is where we need to go. And so to your point about thinking about schools, what we want to think about is not just, hey, here's this cool tool. And this would apply, frankly, to any technology tool in the classroom. Here's this cool tool. Let's just play and see what happens. But instead, be very introduction of this. And so as I'm thinking about this here in my new, I am thinking about how do I roll this out so that teachers can see uses for themselves. Once they see some uses for themselves, I think then they're going to start to be more open to thoughtful uses for their students. I think the teacher themselves need to see the tool.
When you were talking, I was thinking about, I probably should have been listening, my wife would say. But I was thinking that teachers both overvalue themselves and undervalue themselves. And that sounds like a really odd thing to say. But, in my research, and I've spent a lot of time, I'd say half my job now is thinking about AI and thinking about how to implement it. But to me, the whole answer comes down to it's just good teaching. If you follow good teaching and good practice, like, going back to that John Dewey stuff, with you're the guide by the side, not the sage on the stage, because if you're keeping track of the things that kids are doing, you're going to stop them from being able to use AI. And so to me, that's the undervalued. Teachers they think, oh, well, I'm just powerless against this huge, powerful thing that's out there, but they're not. And so to me, that was the thing that stood out from what you were saying there, Jay.
Yeah, and I think that one of the areas where we sometimes make a mistake as educators is we think too much about outputs and not enough about process. And utilizing AI in the classroom is very much about the process, thinking about how do students interact with the technology in a way to, in the end, generate good results. And this is something that we can use AI for as a reflective tool. And so, for example, this last weekend, I went back to Coldwater, not just because I live there, but also because, having left the school year in February, my AP students were getting ready for their U.S. history exam. And so they were having a study session this weekend. So I went. And one of the things I showed them was how they could use ChatGPT to grade a practice essay for themselves, to input into ChatGPT their essay, tell the device to read it with the mind of an AP US history teacher using the rubric that the College Board uses. That then the student gets a result back. They can use that result to improve their work. That's how we need to think about utilizing some of these tools and get our students to think about utilizing some of these tools. And I think that's something we can do, but it has to be a deliberate effort. And, if we do that, I think then we'll start to make some of the strides that we keep hoping for educationally, whether we're talking about AI, any other tech tool, or not about tech at all, thinking about how we help students improve their work.
If you're just tuning in, folks, we are talking to Jay Henry. He's the Educational Technology Coordinator at the Ballard Creek Public Schools system. And you are listening to Inside Outside Technology Podcast, where we're today talking about the impact that AI has on education. And Jay, I love how you, in your discussion with teachers, right, that are some, let's face it, most are struggling with what is this and how does this, impact my job? I loved how you said that you're showing them, because sometimes some of the stuff is hard to comprehend and to grasp. If you watch that 60 Minutes special, this past weekend on AI, the reporter himself was scratching his head going, you're blowing my mind here, right? I think for Jeff and I, when we were watching it, we're like, duh, we've been told this is what we're talking about, right? But teachers are probably that same phase. So impact is a little scary for them. Is it just showing them how they can make their job a little easier or change the way they do their job?
I think that's one of the key entry points into the teacher's mind, is because they are so busy. And it's busier than ever post-COVID because of the impacts of the pandemic on students and families. So they need to find sort of a handle hold to get started in this system. And I think finding a way to streamline some of their workflow will be that handle. And then they will recognize this for the tool that it is. And, one of the things about tools is a hammer can build a house, or it can break all the house's windows, right? The hammer itself is neutral, but the tool can be used in a variety of ways. And right now, I think there's a lot of fear that this hammer is going to break all the windows in the school, instead of recognizing the possibilities that this hammer provides as a tool to get things done. Not everything is a nail, so it's not the solution for everything, but it's also not just a completely foreign thing to bring into our buildings. We've been using AI in a smaller scale with things like Google searches for quite some period of time. And so this is just a new take on this. It's a dramatically new take on it, but nonetheless, it's still a tool that we can try to use.
Jay, you mentioned to me that, all of this change, we've actually talked quite a bit about the way that teachers, and they have to follow the process and that process of showing teachers. You expressed some worries about how this was going to change our culture, thinking about how it's going to change kids. And I think a lot of times we actually had some kids in here. We're doing a podcast club, and we were talking about different topics they were coming up with. And we find out these kids are full of worries. And I think, we know kids have anxiety issues, but these kids have tons of worries. And one of their worries, I was surprised, was AI. And I thought, I thought kids hadn't even heard of this. Although I just did my student tech survey and found out that 20% of our kids here have used AI already to assist them in doing their schoolwork.
Absolutely.
So, and we're really talking, we're 4 months out into this. So what are your concerns about the cultural impact?
My concerns are different from what a lot of the concerns expressed are. I don't think that all of the students are going to cheat now. I just don't think that's the way this is going to play out.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
My concern now is really building upon the concerns of the attention economy that social media has created. And, that has had some really negative consequences for our students. I think that's the source of some of the worries that you just described your students having. And that the same types of companies that created social media to create this desire for engagement by students, with the dopamine addiction that comes along with it, of getting the upvotes and the likes and the friend requests and the, seeing people respond to your posts, that these same kinds of companies are going to take AI and its exponential capabilities and use it in that attention economy. We know that things like Instagram and Snapchat, for example, have negative impacts, particularly on young women, on issues like their appearance and body image. And AI can just take that and ramp it up and make it more effective as an engagement tool. That's the kind of concern that I have. And just to give you an example, Snapchat just this weekend pushed out to my account my AI. I use Snapchat to communicate with my two sons. That's how they like to send pictures back and forth of the things that are going on, so the pictures don't clog up their phones. And I think that's just fine. All of a sudden, I've got this AI device, right?
And you have to pay to get rid of it.
Yes. So I decided to talk to it a little bit. I said, hey, how do you think that you are going to contribute to engagement addiction? And it was interesting because this AI responded, well, could do that, but, really it's up to people themselves to kind of manage themselves. But I responded again. I pushed a little bit. I said, all right, well, but that this is an addictive practice. And it seems like there's a little bit more to be asked of a company than simply I'm laying this addictive thing in front of you, and now I'm going to make it more addictive, and you need to manage yourself. Right?
That's interesting because I don't know if you saw that there's a few websites. You might have actually been the one to tell me that you can talk with a person that actually talks and responds to your questions. But I did see the Snapchat thing this weekend, and my son was like irritated because he wanted to get rid of it. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be, and this is in the context of what I heard the head of Google say, is that we need to take time to figure out how we're not going to ruin our society. Wouldn't it be great? Like the AI feature would be like, hey, maybe you don't want to post that picture of you, or maybe that's a thirst trap. Maybe you should think twice about it. So, to me, and I think there's going to need to be a lot of conversation, not only at a school level, but at a community level and a state and national level, and maybe a world level, is like, how can we harness this kind of technology to benefit humans and to solve those problems rather than and I think you're right, rather than to exacerbate them.
Jay, I think what he's saying is that he wants an AI assistant to help him when next time he goes to the buffet and say, hey, Jeff, you might not want to overload that cheese there.
I just brought John a cupcake. So,
yeah. Well, and I hope that would happen too, but we have historical precedent here. The people that created things like Facebook and so forth, they were good people. I really think they were. And I think at face value, they meant what they said back in the earliest days. We're trying to connect people. But then the pressure came to make money. And Facebook was losing money for a long, long, long time. And people were investing and they say, hey, listen, you got to make money. And they found that little thumbs up icon was their ticket to money. That was the addictive feature that really pushed them over the top. And so we have this historical precedent, and the other social media companies all followed suit, right? They became engagement drivers, and that's what they were there for, because that's how they made money, because that's how they got our data to be able to package and sell, and that's also how they were able to sell us advertisements through our consistent engagement.
Yeah, Jay, to your point, okay, and actually that's a really good point. I was thinking about we used to teach a mass media course at Coldwater. And, it was like television, radio, whatever. And I've been thinking lately that we really need to really rethink like what we're teaching kids about mass media, because, the fake news thing has become, very troublesome, but also, looking at these companies and the things that they're doing and the choices kids are making for those companies. Those are things that our kids need to be able to think critically about. And we've kind of let them go unchecked because we didn't want to be involved with Facebook and we didn't want to be involved with Twitter or TikTok or any of those kind of things because we were afraid of them as educators. But I really think maybe we're going down the wrong path. We're just letting these kids have these technologies just unabated. And, saying it's a privacy issue. So, to me, I mean, I'm looking. I've been deeply disturbed and profoundly inspired in the last 4 months. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I see both on that, and I think that another aspect to add about why we as educators, parents, adults in general may have responded the way that we did is we've had advertisements pushed on us our whole lives through television, right? Yep. We didn't recognize that this is different. Now the ads are targeted in a way that they weren't before. Now it used to be they tried to get the most popular thing they could get onto television that would attract the most eyeballs. Now that doesn't matter. Now they are targeting the advertisements and the influence directly upon you as the viewer, whoever you are, and they know that they can exploit some of our human frailties. And, Facebook, the whistleblower there leaked out that study that Facebook had done using Instagram, and they found they were able to influence people's psychology. That is a power that probably needs to be checked at a larger level than us here on this podcast, but also it's something we need to talk to our young people about through schools and through our families to say, listen, you don't want to give up this level of authority to someone over your life. And my concern is that AI will be taken by these companies and utilized, as Snapchat appears to already be trying to do, to just increase the level of influence by the creation of the chatbots, by using it to personalize, by using it to target content creation, to keep people engaged on the platforms, and then play into, the conditions that already exist psychologically that can cause people, to suffer. And that's the concern I have culturally about this. It's not that I think it's the tool. We could use it to build a home. We could use it to break the windows. Right now, it's the incentives that exist in these media companies. The incentives lead us more towards breaking windows because that's how they're making money right now. And as long as that attention economy continues to persist in social media, then AI, I think, presents that kind of a concern, not to ban it, not to try to shut it down. I don't think this 6-month pause thing that people signed on to is going to amount to anything. But instead, we have to be better humans and take care of each other, take care of our children, and devote a lot of energy to that instead of just taking the hands-off approach that you described earlier.
That's a great insight by both of you, because, I mean, you can see it's not out of the realm of possibility that your first AI influencer could just be born tomorrow, right? And that's a scary thing.
Well, literally born tomorrow, because it could just be a bot that's influencing you now.
But, I think not only the bot could be born tomorrow, but a human baby could be born tomorrow that, in some number of months is going to be years is going to be engaged in social media. And, with each generation that passes, it's a bit different for our children, Jeff. I think that, the first interactions with Facebook were still in its relatively, generous phase. It wasn't really in the big money-making machine yet. And then now we're dealing with young people who've grown up where social media is just a cash generator. I mean, it just generates cash.
And it's such a different world when we start to look at like our children and future generations, and we're thinking about our, generations. I think that, that really is a difficult thing to for people our age to say, okay, I'm not going to think about it the way I was raised or the technology I had, but I have to really look at it how is this technology today and how is it going to play out and what can I do to make sure that we're better humans and we do better than we had in the past instead of making, lots of mistakes. I think most people think we're making mistakes with technology, but nobody's willing to do anything about it.
And I just was a little critical, right, of the tech industry because they have done things the way they've done things, and I think they'll apply AI to that. We can apply the same criticism or concern, at least to the educational field. We are still in a model of education that dates back to the 1800s. So we have been slow to change and recognize what is necessary, recognize the possible threats, And so therefore, that's what we're going to have to do. And that's where, again, not banning, not stopping, not blocking at the school district level of preventing students from using these tools, but to teach them.
Yeah, I actually just heard a podcast from, I think his name is Chris Leedy from Harvard. And he said, if we don't change things in education, we're just training our kids to be beat by AI. And that was profound. And everybody I've taken it has been like, gosh, you're really right. If we just keep doing things the same way we had for, hundreds of years, which is the educational model in this country, we're gonna make these kids suffer.
Exactly right. I heard somebody else on a different podcast say something very similar, and in terms of jobs being eliminated by AI. And this person said, listen, AI is not going to take your job. The people that can work with AI, they will take your job. So it's about changing to fit the new circumstances. That's always the challenge of an educator, to reach our students where they are and to help them develop to where they need to be, not to try to push away influences that are going to be there just because we don't know how to handle them.
Great conversation, fellows. Jay, thanks so much for being on the Inside Outside podcast. We really appreciate your time.
I was glad to talk to you both.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
Again, that is Jay Henry. He is the Educational Technology Coordinator at the Ballard Creek Public Schools System in Ballard Creek, Michigan. Jeff, I think the bell's about to ring pretty soon here. I don't know. Maybe not. Do bells still ring in schools? I don't know.
The bells still ring, but not for me.
You technology guys all stick together, right? We're always working overtime.
That's right.
All right, folks. We'll be back with a new podcast really soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.